development, right? The germinal period, which is the first 2 weeks, right? Zygote divides and implants in the uterine walls. This is how we know a pregnancy starts, right? The embryonic period, which is 3 to 8 weeks. That's the development of major, right, organs, brain, spine. And then the fetal period, which is 9 weeks to birth, which is where all of the other stuff gets formed, right? Your brain fully develops, right? Brain structures, body structures are defined, little fingers, little toes, right? Baby starts to actually look like a baby. Now, the thing that I need you to pay attention to, and the thing that's going to pop up on your exam, so we're going to go over this a lot, is that certain events that happen when a woman is pregnant, right, can impact fetal development depending on how far along she is, right? So, I don't know if you can see this because it's kind of tiny and the projector really throws things off. But these green bars, right, the green portion is how likely that major structure is going to be impacted, right, if there is some sort of trauma to the mother. That could be physical trauma, a disease, a disorder, right, drug use, mental health medication, any other type of medication, right? That green is how far along that area of development can be damaged, right? Early on in this first period, right, this embryonic period, that green also indicates how likely miscarriage is to occur. The purple side, right, indicate that if there's trauma between these weeks, there's a minor development, right, a minor defect might occur, right? Nothing detrimental to the health of the baby or the mother, right? But it may cause a physical, psychological, or cognitive defect later on, right? And a student downstairs shared with me that, like, somehow she was born with her organs on the wrong side of her body. She was like, what phase does that happen? And I was like, oh, I have no idea, we should research that. Because a pregnancy is really dangerous and really complicated, right? It's absolutely incredible. In these first 2 weeks, miscarriage is probably most likely, right? But not necessarily as significantly impacted as in that second period, right? On your exam, and we'll go over this, I will pull up this little chart and I will pull up the case study questions. There are 3 questions, two questions, I think there's 2 questions. So-and-so's in a car accident and is this many weeks pregnant. What could possibly happen to her unborn baby, right? Those are the questions on your exam, correct? So we will go over this Thursday. This chart is important. I'm going to tell you it again. This chart is important for passing your exam. Now, we know some common prenatal development, right, threats are who's one of my medical people? Who's a nurse?
I'm not, but teratogens.
Thank you. I struggle. I'm like, there's too many T's for me to pronounce them. Essentially, it's an environmental substance that can harm development, right? So it's anything that's a virus, right? It's drugs and alcohol. Could be a medication that the mom is taking. Could be a disease that the mother contracts, right? It's any sort of substance that can harm development. So we know, right, fetal alcohol syndrome, there's a lot of research on this, right? This is a fetal alcohol brain. This is a normal brain, right? We know drinking during pregnancy impacts brain development. One would think the same is true for marijuana.
And it is. There's studies that say it is.
Yeah, I have a couple people who are like, yeah, I mean, my girlfriend quit drinking, but she still smokes. I'm like, okay. I'm going to show you these brains. Yeah, okay. Right. Zika virus was very widely studied back in the day because babies were being born with very noticeable birth defects, right? Brain abnormalities, right? Things where people were going, oh, the mothers are exposed to something that's impacting the children, right? So Zika virus is one of those. And it was contracted through mosquito bites. So it's not even like you could necessarily, depending on your, where you lived, right, and what you had access to, this was unavoidable. Here's another little chart. Talks about some of the possible outcomes of common birth defects and conditions and when they happen, right? I was giving the example, lead exposure is something that I deal with a lot in my line of work to this day, even though I don't work with infants, and I typically don't work with women or pregnant women. A lot of my clients, though, come in looking like they have ADHD, they're impulsive, they're reactive, they're angry, they can't control themselves, they can't sit still, can't think through thoughts, right? And then we give them a stimulant to address their ADHD and it doesn't work. What the hell? Well, it's probably drug poisoning, right? And it could be lead exposure that they had when they themselves were young, right? So babies crawl around and put everything in their mouths. Or could just be that their mother, when she was pregnant, lived in a house that had lead feet. Right? Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they couldn't help it because they grew up in poverty, right? So we're going to talk about kind of how different environmental factors impact development in our next slide, because I forgot the order of the slides. So babies have some hardwiring, which is super cool. I don't know if you've ever like observed newborn babies. I don't really have that opportunity often, right? But it also friends, it depends on babies, right? They're born with some innate reflexes, right? These are hardwired survival impulses, right? Babies root, they suck, and they grasp, right? This is to help them find food sources, right? They also have some hardwired motor skills, right? Voluntary movement, babies will seek to move themselves and roll over, right? Sit up, right? When they develop the muscle, start to walk, right? Those are all things that like their brain's going, hey, we should do this. Hey, eventually they realize that like walking is a more efficient way to get from point A to point B than crawling. Or crying to be picked up and moved there, right? Because sometimes the person in the picture doesn't push you where you want to go, right? Anytime your body and brain develop new skills, right? Maturation. Physical, mental, emotional, right? Maturation or the process of maturity, right? When your brain and your body develop a new skill, right? Hopefully it's advantageous for your survival. Babies also have some sensory development as they grow older, so babies don't come out just ready to see and hear and talk, obviously, we know that, right? Babies don't have great vision. That's why they like bright lights and stuff like that, right? They can't actually see very well. So somebody was telling me they don't even develop like colored vision until a couple months in.
Yeah, they tell you to like give them stuff that's like really high contrast so they can focus on it more.
Right,
Yeah.
because otherwise it just looks like a blob.
Yeah.
Right? They can hear super well though. That's why everyone's like, really quiet, just make it out. Right? Because like they'll wake up like that. Right? But yeah, it's a survival instinct if you think about it. Right? Back in caveman days, with cave babies, right? If there was a rustle outside, everyone needed to be awake and aware, right? Because that was how people survived back then, right? There's studies that say newborns prefer sweeter tastes. I'm not exactly sure why, if that's poisons would be more bitter, so back in the day it would be advantageous for babies to want to avoid those kinds of tastes.
Ooh. I think that that's because sugary stuff is energy, and babies need a lot of energy to grow.
Also, breast milk is sweet.
Sweet. Okay, see, so that makes sense. I have no way to know that. So yeah, obviously you want them to be attracted to the food source that's going to sustain them and help them grow, right? This obviously is developed over time, right? Unless you were me, and at age 5, it was just like, okay, well, glasses. She can't see. The other things that are happening with infants and in early childhood development, right? Remember those myelinated sheaths, right? How we form neural networks by repeating behavior over time, right? To create synaptic connections, right? To repeat behaviors that are advantageous for our growth and development. That's still happening. Babies are doing that at like triple the rate that anybody else is doing, right? Except for maybe adolescents. Interesting fact. Your brain goes through another little resurgence when you're a teenager during puberty with the help of those increased hormones, right? So over time, babies are pruning, right, and developing, right? So getting rid of what doesn't work, keeping what works, and developing what works, right? Neural networks, right, that are seeking to, babies realize, okay, if I cry, mom's gonna come get me, right? So I'm gonna cry more, get what I want, right? I have a friend who, she taught her son sign language. So he'll just come up and do whatever, and she'll get him whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. But if he doesn't really cry, he doesn't have to, so you can communicate a different way, right? I'm like, that's craziness. Babies are genius. Right, but our brain is doing that when we're infants, right? We are forming neural networks, we're grooming ones that are disadvantageous, right? Sleep training is a form of pruning neural networks, right? Teaching babies how to self-soothe, stuff like that. Babies are also in early childhood, right? Young children are also impacted by their environment, right? Like I said, if you grew up in poverty, right? Maybe you did grow up in an apartment with lead paint, right? Maybe that you were crawling around and putting things in your mouth, and that lead, there was some lead in the paint chips that were on the floor, right? And that's all that your family could afford. Maybe because you grew up in poverty, you didn't have access to formula that was nutrient rich, right? Or you did not have access to fruits and vegetables as a young child, so you were given whatever you could get at the corner store, because that's all mom and dad could afford and knew how to get, right? That absolutely impacts development. Same is true with a stressful living environment, right? And this has nothing to do with poverty. You could have lived in the lap of luxury, had a nanny in a playroom, but if mom and dad hate each other and are fighting all the time, right? Or one of them's addicted to substances and another one has an untreated mental illness, that stressful living environment is going to impact your development, right? Social stimulation and affection, right? Again, you can grow grow up in the lap of luxury, or you can grow up in the projects, if your parents don't touch you, comfort you, talk to you, care for you, you don't have interaction with peers your own age, right? You are going to be affected by that. In fact, you are growing psychopaths, essentially. You are going to ignore your children and not give them any sort of affection or social stimulation. You are also not giving them the opportunity to develop empathy. When you don't have empathy, you don't care about people. When you don't care about people, you're more likely to harm them, right? So, your environment as an infant and as a child drastically impact your development as an adolescent and as an adult. Good news is it can be corrected. One thing we did learn from Harry Harlow, strangely enough, is that even if your home life is awful, if we can intervene in time and get kids strong social connections with their peers, right? And some sort of caregiver response from an older adult that is either a teacher or a mentor or a grandparent or someone, we can start to course correct, right? So Harry Harlow, while he very unethically researched very cute monkeys, we did learn that there is some course correction, right? Which is why we have programs we have in schools, right? And in rec centers and in other areas like youth serving organizations, right? Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things like that. Because a lot of research says we can course correct what's going on at home to a certain extent with resources in the community. Okay, creepy video time. I promised you creepy videos, didn't I? So we're going to look at Dr. Harlow's rhesus monkey study, right? He was one of the first psychologists to study attachment. I'm telling you, the monkeys are stupid. Like the fake monkeys are creepy. We're going to do the creepy video. Because some people do not do well just studying words on a page, right? This is another study strategy. Remember how we talked about different types of research? Remember that? It's a long time ago. I want you to think back to that, right? When we're watching this video, I want you to identify what type of study Dr. Harlow was doing, right? And how you know, right? And is it possible that he had one big umbrella study and then a little type of study within it? And if so, I would like you to be able to identify that. We're going to talk about why it may or may not have been ethical what he studied, right? And then I want you to think about critical thinking, right? You see how there's a thread here? I want you to think about okay, are we surprised by these results or no? And if we're not, right, is it because we have social structures in place now that have taken these findings and integrated them into how we've all been raised, right? And what we now expect from social services organizations, from educational programs, from youth serving organizations, right? And if so, what do you think we can accredit all the way back here to Harry Harlow, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Normally that would be a paper prompt, but we don't have time. I feel like this guy hates when I do. First of all, adorable monkey. Second of all,
What happened to the monkey?
huh?
What happened to the monkey?
Oh, you're right now.
Dr. Harry Harlow does incredible work with primates, most particularly rhesus monkeys, is now considered a classic in behavioral science and has revolutionized our understanding of the role that social relationships play in early development. When Harlow was conducting his research in the 1950s and 1960s, psychology, at least in the United States, but generally all over the world, was dominated by behaviorists. The behavioral theory of attachment would suggest that an infant would form an attachment with a carer that provides food. Now, Harry and other social and cognitive psychologists argued that this perspective overlooked the importance of comfort, companionship, and love in promoting healthy development. In 1958, Harlow separated infant rhesus monkeys from their mothers immediately after birth and placed them in cages with access to 2 surrogate mothers. One of these surrogate mothers was made out of wire and one was covered in a soft toweling cloth. The infant rhesus monkeys were assigned to one of 2 conditions. In the first condition, the wire mother had a milk bottle and the cloth mother did not. The second condition, the cloth mother had food while the wire mother had none. In both conditions, Harlow found that the infant rhesus monkeys spent significantly more time with the cloth mother than they did with the wire mother. When only the wire mother had food, the babies came to the wire mother to feed and then immediately returned to cling on to the cloth surrogate mother. In both conditions, all 3 rhesus monkeys drank equal amounts and grew physically at the same rate. but the similarities end there. Monkeys who had the soft tactile contact with their terry cloth surrogate mother behaved quite differently than monkeys whose mothers were made out of hard wire. Hollow observed behavioral differences between monkeys who had grown up with their surrogate mothers and those with their natural mothers. Some of these differences included that the surrogate-raised monkeys were much more timid. They didn't know how to act with other monkeys. They were easily bullied and couldn't stand up for themselves when placed with other monkeys. They had a difficult time mating, and the females who were raised by surrogate mothers were themselves inadequate mothers. These behaviors were observed only in the monkeys who were left with a surrogate mother for more than 90 days. For rhesus monkeys that were raised with a surrogate mother less than 90 days, Hollow found that the effects could be reversed if placed in a normal environment where they could form attachments with other rhesus monkeys. However, those who were kept with their surrogate mothers for greater than 90 days, Hollow found that the social effects or the social impairments were largely irreversible. Hollow initially concluded that early maternal deprivation, i.e. being deprived of a mother, leads to emotional damage, but that its impact could be reversed in monkeys if an attachment was made before the end of what he called the critical period, that is, that 90-day period. However, he argued that if maternal deprivation lasted after the end of the critical period, then no amount of exposure to the mothers or peers could alter the emotional and social damage that had already occurred. Later on, Hollow concluded that it was rather social deprivation rather than maternal deprivation that the young monkeys were suffering from. In another experiment, when he brought some other infant monkeys up on their own for 20 minutes a day in a playroom with 3 other monkeys, he found they grew up to be quite normal emotionally and socially. While today these experiments would be considered completely unethical, and for good reason, these were not even the worst out of the series of experiments that Harry Hollow did with rhesus monkeys. But these studies produced groundbreaking empirical evidence for the importance of the parent-child attachment relationship, as well as the importance of early socialization with peers. Indeed, more than 70 years later, Hollow's discoveries continue to inform the scientific understanding of the fundamental building blocks of human behavior. So once again, grossly unethical studies have played an important part in building our understanding of human psychology. That's it for today.
Okay, so, what do we think? This is a very famous study. Like they said, redone multiple times, slightly different conditions, right? Because normally once you do one research study, especially if it's your first, you have more questions than answers, right? So then you repeat it,
I think the results are obvious.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Like you those poor monkeys,
I know.
right? I think it's common sense as a therapist, right? That like obviously like love and affection is much more important than the type of food you get, right? But back in the day, people didn't do that. What else do we think? Do we have other thoughts about this? Do we know what type of study this was? Yes, very good. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any idea what his variables were? Or why it was experimental?
It was novel.
Huh?
Was it novel? Is that why it was experimental?
Was it what?
Novel, like new.
No.
Okay.
No.
No. Because when I think of experimental, I think of something that hasn't been tried yet. Sorry.
No, remember when we talked about in class a couple weeks ago, there's different types of studies, and it's an experimental study because he had variables that he manipulated, right?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember what happened a week ago. I'm sorry.
He also did a little bit of observation, right?
For the independent variable, was that from others?
Mm-hmm.
And the dependent was from.
Absolutely. Yep. Very good. Yep, very good. Yep, absolutely. And he switched it up a little bit, right? Because he gave the monkeys an option, right? One monkey had like a wire mother that had food, and the next one, just the cloth mother had nothing, but they would go get the food and then try to like rock themselves with it. It's wild to me because I saw this behavior in juvenile detention, right? Like kids would get upset and they would self-soothe by rocking, right? Or like banging their head on a wall, right? Like, I'm like, oh, that's such an attachment disorder, right? Why is this study ethical or not? Why does this not, why, I mean, he said in the video it's unethical, but why is it unethical?
It's a harm, mental harm.
Yeah, to the monkeys, right? Monkeys are intelligent, right? You
They
can't,
said that some of them didn't recover.
yeah, exactly. Like, it's not like they're then giving the monkeys therapy, right? Or like, if they had reunited those monkeys with, like, I don't know what a group of monkeys is called, a tribe? I don't know. If they reunited them with more monkeys, they wouldn't have done well, right? They were easily bullied, they couldn't stand up for themselves, they were highly intimidated, they probably would have gotten attacked or lashed out and attacked somebody else, right? So, not only did they damage those monkeys socially and emotionally, but then they couldn't be reintegrated, right? Which, unfortunately, is how we treat juveniles in the juvenile justice system. It's a whole different problem, sorry, side note. Interestingly enough, I see this a lot with my clients, right? It comes up different in men who have been to prison, right? But timid, no social skills, easily bullied, right? Issues forming relationships, right? This is some of the main things my clients say when they're like, well, I started, you know, I matriculated into a gang, I got into a gang because they would protect me. They pretended to care about me in so much that I was valuable to them. If they gave me something to do, I did it, right? Don't have the social skills to navigate keeping themselves safe in prison, but the gang will do that for them, right? And then they don't have to form the relationship in any sort of vulnerable or emotional or social way. It's really just, you're part of this, you have this job, you do this when we ask you to, right? So it's very instructional and transactional. That's the crux of like gang formation, right? When we look at it, and then we wonder why children in juvenile detention facilities have a big gang problem, because they have an attachment problem that preceded their involvement in the legal system. It's a different thesis for a different program. 3 types of attachment. Now, attachment studies are kind of trendy right now. There's all like BuzzFeed articles that are like, take this quiz, what's your attachment style, right? There's 3 main attachment styles for children. This gets a little bit more complicated as we get older, right? Dr. Ainsworth, Dr. Mary Ainsworth, who, bonus information and possibly a bonus question on your exam, is one of the first female scientists of note in a foundational study that we're going to talk about. Dr. Ainsworth, now unsurprisingly, it's her experiment on a child bearing, right? She identified 3 main attachment styles. Now this ambivalent attachment style over here, there's a couple subcategories of this, right? Because ambivalence is pretty broad and this develops into different ways as children develop. Yeah.
Quick question, I'm sorry. Was she, Ainsworth was the first, what?
She's just the first female doctor we've discussed so far this semester.
thank
Not that
you.
important. So, secure attachment, right, is the goal, right? Secure attachment is healthy attachment. Avoidant attachment is literally like, I don't care, get away from me, right? Ambivalent attachment is, I don't know if I want you here or if I want you gone. I don't know. I haven't decided, I don't have any thoughts about it, just get away from me, right? So, in children, this is a little bit more apparent than it is in adolescents and adults, but if you know what you're looking for, it becomes very, very evident. So now you're gonna be walking around analyzing all of your relationships with everyone in your life and also all of your friends' relationships, and you're gonna be like, I think your boyfriend has ambivalent attachment, and that's why he's an asshole to you, right? By all means, you can reference me, that's fine. So, secure childhood attachment, right? Infants who have attached securely, right, tend to be really distressed when a parent or a caregiver leaves the room, right? Babies and young children don't have object permanence, right? So when you leave, they think you're gone forever. When you take the toy from them, they think it's going to be gone forever, they're never gonna see it again. That's one, why they have such an extreme response, right? And are not quieted down by the fact that I'll be right back, because they don't know that, right? So when mom leaves the room, you're like, oh my gosh, mom's gone forever. Oh my gosh, I'm distressed, this is awful, right? But then when mom comes back, you're like, oh, okay, cool, you're back. You're gonna keep me safe. I was worried. Thank you for coming back. We're good. We're chill. False alarm. Everything's great, right? Secure attachment. Avoidant attachment. This kid really doesn't notice when mom leaves or when mom comes back, right? They're not distressed at her absence, and they're not really fazed by her return, right? They're just kind of like playing, doing, oh, I'm doing me. Go ahead, do whatever you need to do, right? Now, this could be, right, because they've learned very quickly in their first couple months of life that when I cry, my parents aren't going to do anything, so why bother? I can't depend on them to be there for me, so I'm not going to track where they are because I'm on my own, right? Ambivalent attachment is typically formed out of some inconsistent or unpredictable caregiver behavior, right? So these are the kids that cannot decide if they're better off with or without the parent because they cannot predict how that parent is going to react, right? This may be the case because a parent is using drugs, right? And sometimes they're happy and they're excited and they're doing whatever, and then other times they're withdrawing, or they're down, or they're gone seeking a substance, right? So they can't predictably predict whether or not mom's gonna be there, dad's gonna be there or not. This could be a parent who's untreated bipolar. Sometimes mom won't leave her room for 3 weeks and I have to fend for myself because she's not going to come out of her room, and other times she's so manic that she's taking us on vacation and bringing us out of school, right? I don't know what I'm gonna get when I go home, right? So I don't know if I'm better with you or without you, but I'm distressed either way, right? It looks a little bit simpler in children, it's a little bit more complicated in adults, right? And obviously secure attachment's what we want, right? Healthy, collaborative relationship that has equity, you value each other, respect each other's feelings, communicate efficiently, right? Give each other space to be independent, but also support each other, right? Anxious attachment in adulthood could be anything from, I have guys, this is wild to me. So codependence is anxious attachment, right? If you've ever heard the term codependence, we'll talk more about it, don't worry. I have guys who are like, yeah, I want to do my overnight, and my girlfriend's in my earbuds all day. I'm just talking the entire shift. I work a 12-hour warehouse shift. They're like, yeah, we're just like, I don't know, she's watching TV, breathing, sometimes she's asleep. I'm like, why in the hell do you need to be on the phone with her then? Oh, well, I just like to have her there. What? First of all, what AirPods do you have that last that long? Second of all, what? No, right? So that's an anxious attachment, right? Going to someone's phone, having their location, right? Now that tracks to abusive, right? We want abusive relationships later. But that anxious attachment, like, where'd you go, I need you here, I need you here, I need you here, right? Avoidant dismissive, right, is a type of ambivalent attachment, right? That is the, oh, you're gonna fight with me, I'm gonna shut down, right? Or someone who's not very accessible or emotionally available, right? Someone who maybe has a lot of superficial relationships. And you're avoidant fearful, right? These are kind of like your I hate you, don't leave me, right? Because your borderline personality is another type of ambivalence, right? This is your push you away, wait, no, come back. Why, no, I love you, what do you mean? I know I treat you like shit, but I love you, right? So that's that kind of thing. So, you have a friend where you're like, why do you put up with that person? Because they treat you like shit? And you're like, but they love me. You're like, he has an avoidant, fearful attachment style, and you need to send him to therapy, or her to therapy. So, secure attachment, luckily is the most common. Mary Ainsworth found this was 70% of infants that she studied pretty reliably. So 70% of the population, hopefully, has secure attachment styles. That's great. My ex-husband, no. Most people do. So, infants who have securely attached caregivers typically are able to adapt to unfamiliar play environments. So you can see this, again, please don't like go to a playground and observe children without a you're gonna end up in my waiting room for the wrong reasons. Like, you're gonna know a whole different side of me. But if you're out with friends and they have kids, right, I can't turn my work brain off. So I'm always thinking this, right? I went to the park, my best friend from high school, she and her husband live in Buffalo, they have 2 little kids. We go to the park with them, and we were able to sit, have our coffee, and chit-chat, and the kids, like, went and played. And, like, the older one kind of was, like, fine, she would go and play and, like, come back when she was hungry or, like, needed a drink. The little one would go play for a little bit and then come back and, like, look and, like, wave, right? And then go again and then come back and, like, wave, right? Like, she was good as long as she could see her big sister or us. But she was fine. She was able to play, get along with other kids, whatever, right? But, like, she fell, right? She fell off the swing, skinned her knee, came over. Oh, my knee, blah, blah, blah. We gave her a Band-Aid, gave her some juice. Okay, go ahead, you're good, right? She was easily comforted. She knew that when she came to her mom, because my friend is a fucking super mom, she's great. Hand makes all of the Halloween costumes, they're incredible. Right, she came over, she was distressed, she was able to come down, she got back up and went to go play, right? That's a securely attached kid, right? Because caregivers who have securely attached kids, they're warm, they're nurturing, they're attentive. That kid knows that if they come to their parent, right, they are going to get, 1, a predictable response, right? And 2, that person, that parent, that caregiver, right, the caregiver, because it's not always a biological parent, that could be grandma, could be foster mom, could be big sister, right? That caregiver is going to be reliably and predictably nurturing, attentive, warm, anticipating their needs, knowing, okay, that's okay, you're fine, here's a Band-Aid, here's some Neosporin, right, here's a snack, you're okay, right? They're attuned to their children's needs and wants, right? Oh, it's gonna be cold, so I brought a sweater for you, right? Oh, I know that around this time you get hungry, here's a snack, right? They stay close to their children, but they give them freedom, right? Because anxious attachers would be so enmeshed, right, or can be enmeshed and codependent that they smother someone and do not give them the freedom to be their own person and to kind of step away, right, under the safety of supervision, right? They're reliable and predictable. So if dad and mom divorce and dad says, okay, buddy, I'm gonna come pick you up at 2 o'clock on Saturday, you sure as hell better be there at 2 o'clock on Saturday, because if you're not, that kid's gonna learn very quickly that you're not reliable. Half of my clients, emotionally, are still 8-year-old boys waiting on the porch with their book bag, waiting for dad to come pick them up. Kid you not. And I see it every day, right? They are that 16-year-old boy whose dad said, I'm gonna come get you this weekend, and they are standing on the porch with their art project and their book bag, waiting for dad to show up. When I tell you, like, I gave an example downstairs. I was in court recently with this young man that I used to work with, who now unfortunately is back in jail. And he was like 22, young. And I at 36 and his probation officer at 42 were like mom and dad pair for this kid, right? Hated me because mom had raised him, but like was super neglectful. So anytime I was late for a session, anytime I didn't answer a text message right away, I was the worst person in the world. I was a horrible therapist. He didn't want to ever talk to me again, right? His probation officer, who was, I love it. He and I worked together for years. Lovely man. Really, really good at his job. Would stop in and check on him, give him like pep talks, tell him he was proud of him, whatever. Had to violate him because he wouldn't stop smoking marijuana. And he was running around with a gun. You can't do that on federal supervision. So, he had to go to court. So the probation officer and I go to court because we're like, listen, this kid is really volatile, he's really unpredictable, he's really mentally ill. Like, we had to prep the marshals on how to deal with him because like he's a strong kid, he could hurt somebody. We're in court. He has an outburst, yells at the judge, who is a woman in her 40s. Again, projecting all the mom shit, right? So the marshals are escorting him out, which is such a traumatic thing, I hate going to court. Escorting him out in handcuffs, and he's looking dead at the probation officer that I work with, he's going, you lied to me, you don't care about me, I was trying to make you proud, like sobbing, screaming at the probation officer. He had to leave because he started tearing up, because he was like, I'm just doing my fucking job, bro, like, but he's that little kid waiting on the porch for a dad to just tell him he's proud of him, like to pick him up and take him home, like, heartbreaking. That is half of my caseload, right? Little boys waiting for dad to pick them up from the porch, right? Waiting for mom to come to their, like, whole plan, right? If you are a securely attached caregiver, you say you're coming at 2 o'clock to pick them up, you're going at 2 o'clock to pick them up. That doesn't mean like, oh, I'm gonna go buy you a toy at Walmart and then you go drop the toy, right? Kids aren't really looking for that. Kids are looking for, you said you're gonna do something and you didn't, right? And I can always tell when I had to change appointments this evening. I'm leaving work at 5, which is a normal time to leave work. My aunt's in town, I'm taking her to dinner. She's having surgery tomorrow. So, I canceled the last minute 2 sessions. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot I have this thing to do. I'll see you next week. And the one guy freaked out on me. And I was like, oh, right, this attachment thing. Oh, right, predictability. Shit. Right? Like, because it comes out in these ways where, like, you probably have friends that are like this, right? You said you were going to do this. I relied on you. You're not going to do this. I hate you. I don't want to be your friend anymore, right? These are probably kids who have divorced parents who's used to one parent lying to them over and over and over again, right? They don't have the frustration tolerance to handle discipline, right? Your securely attached friends will be, I understand things come up. We have enough rapport and we're established enough in our relationship that I know you got me next time, right? Because you've reliably done. Insecure attachment, right? Which is your anxious and your ambivalent attachment, right? Is a little bit different, right? So people who are avoidant, right, and their attachment style, as little kids, they were willing to explore. They're like, okay, cool, new adventure, new playground, new playroom, sweet. Mom, go do what you need to do. I'll be fine, right? These are people who are a little bit toxically independent as adults, right? These are kids who don't really care if mom leaves or comes back, don't really care if dad actually comes on Saturday to pick them up or not, because they're just so inconsistent that they've learned not to attach themselves to the outcome, right? Unfortunately, in adulthood, this plays out where people are pretty much emotionally unavailable, and either are the people who favor infidelity, right, or non-monogamy, or they're the people who just won't commit to anything, right? Because it's not important to them. They don't need it to feel secure and feel safe. They do, technically, but they don't think that they do, and that's what we do there, right? So, caregivers who nurture an avoidant or anxious attachment, right, typically are inconsistent and unpredictable. This could be from mental illness, this could be from drug use, this could be from being a single mom of 3 and working 3 jobs and only coming home to cook dinner and make sure everybody went to bed, right, and being annoyed or burnt out or exhausted, right, or distracted and on the phone while they're parenting, right? Doesn't always mean absent, it just means inconsistent, right? And unfortunately, it's very hard to be a consistent nurturing parent, work 3 jobs and raise multiple children. That's impossible, right? And women are superheroes who try their best, right? Or single dads, same thing, right? But it still has an impact on kids, right? These are kids that may not be able, right, to feel safe unless there's some kind of chaos, right? So I have a lot of guys and friends personally, right, who when things are steady and calm are like waiting for that next shoe to drop, right? Or they're gonna blow it up just because it can't be going, it's going too well, something's gonna happen, so I'm just gonna take control of it and make it happen, right? They self-sabotage. These are the kids who are constantly adapting to change. They never expect a constant, and when they get the constant, they don't trust it, right? Now, this may be a result of trauma. This could be a result of domestic violence, right? We know that domestic violence happens in cycles. If you witness mom and dad in a DV, or dad and dad, or mom and mom, you know that DV is actually occurring in higher rates of same-sex relationships and marriages, right? But if you're the child of 2 caregivers who are in a domestically violent relationship, even if they're not biologically yours, and you are seeing all of those phases from the honeymoon phase and the super lovey-dovey phase to the manipulative, coercive, controlling to the escalation to physical violence and back around again, that is enough inconsistency, even if both parents are home every night for family dinner and taking you to the park on Sundays, right? Just seeing the cycle of domestic violence is enough inconsistency and unpredictability to cause a problem, right? These are children that may desire closeness, but not know how to get it, right? They might either fear that caregiver, right? You see dad be abusive to mom, it's really hard to then go ask him for a hug, right? If mom is sometimes depressed, sometimes manic, and when she's depressed, she's volatile and angry and throwing faces at the wall, right? Or screaming at you, right? It's hard to ask that parent for a hug even though all you want is to be loved by them, right? Over time, this develops into that I hate you, don't leave me, right? It's actually a borderline personality disorder, which is a whole thing we're gonna talk about in a couple chapters, right? These often are the clients I have in my office who so badly want someone to attach to and open up to and want a healthy relationship. They have no idea how to get it, and when they do get it, they're so scared of it, right? But they just push them away, right? This happens all the time. People play this out all the time. I was telling an officer the other day when I had a guy refuse treatment. He lied in his assessments. Said he was fine. I was like, "He's gonna lie to me. We can't treat him. We can't have him in therapy. He's gonna lie to me. Like, it's not helpful. It's not productive. He's not gonna make appointments. We're gonna be going back to court because this guy doesn't want to be here." That's stupid. Let him deny treatment. I will say no treatment recommended at this time, right? In 6 months, I kid you not, something's gonna happen, and you're gonna be like, "Hey, do you think you should go talk to Casey again?" And he's gonna go, "Maybe." And he's gonna come, and he's gonna be inconsistent for a couple months, and we're gonna develop a relationship a little bit, and then he's probably gonna think that he's fine, and he's gonna be like, "Nah, once a month," and once a month's gonna turn into every 2 months because he has a work conflict, or he forgot, and needs to reschedule. And then eventually he's gonna come back, something else is gonna happen, he's gonna be like, "Oh shit, well you're still here. I guess now you've passed enough tests that I can talk to you." Right? And that's what this is. This is this constant, like, I want to get close to someone, I don't know how, because every time I got close to my caregivers or my parents, something bad happened and they rejected me. Right? Versus ambivalent attachment, right? So these are infants who typically, right, those are the kids that cry, right? No matter what's happening. I don't know if I need you here or not. Right? They're pretty much unwilling to explore a new environment because it's also unsafe. They're not really equipped to manage that, right? But they also have mixed feelings on if they're in the new environment, the caregiver isn't keep them safe either, right? This could be a single mom who moves in with every boyfriend she has, so there's nothing steady, but both caregivers either aren't attentive or are passively, neglectful or abusive, right? These are kids who don't trust their parent enough to keep them safe, so they're not consoled when they return, right? Like we said, 2 different types, avoidant, dismissive, and disorganized, right? there is this really cool website called the Attachment Project, attachmentproject.org, if you wanna mess around with it. It's for like normal people, not criminals. I realize that I gave you a extreme example. This can happen, right, over time. This also is something sometimes that you don't realize you struggle with until you get into your first like adult relationship. Then you're like, oh shit, why is this hard, right? And sometimes you're like, I know what I'm doing, why is this person struggling, right? I'm telling you, talk to your friends, talk to your significant others about how they grew up in their relationship with their parents. They're gonna be like, why are you crying? You're like, well, because it's gonna tell you how you're gonna attach to me, right? The whole like, you know, girls have daddy issues, right? Like, no, like people who have parent issues, right? People who have caregiver issues struggle in relationships. That's just, we know this, right? That's why, I don't know if you remember, think back to when we talked about self-report studies and descriptive research methods, right? That was a while ago. I showed you the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale. Of the 10 questions on the Adverse Childhood Experiences, caregiver disruption accounts for 4 separate questions. Did a caregiver go to jail? Did a caregiver have mental illness? Did a caregiver have addiction? Right? And were your parents divorced? 4 different questions on the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale account for caregiver disruption. That says to me that 4 out of 10 questions looks for that. And another one is, did a caregiver get physically or emotionally abused in front of you in the household? So what happens to those 5 questions about inconsistent caregiver attachment? The Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale. That means if you experienced any one of those, yet alone multiple, because they tend to come in pairs, you are more predisposed in adulthood to experience mental health disorders and post-traumatic stress and negative health outcomes. This is huge when we look at the research, right? Questions? No, sorry, I feel passionate about this because this is all my grown men that I deal with. They, I see this all day. So, Dr. Ainsworth, right? She did this study. It's called The Strange Situation. It is a very strange situation. Same questions apply from the first video. Take a look at what type of study you think this is, right? Take a look at how you think and what your thoughts are in the experiment. Was it ethical? Why or why not? Look at the date, 1969 is when this was done. And what are your thoughts? What are your reactions?
Do you want me to save my question before or after the video? Because it's slightly unrelated, but has to do with like a childhood abuse, and I just didn't know if it was or was not, so I didn't know if I should ask the question before or after the video.
Probably after.
All right, thank you.
In 1969, American psychologist Mary Ainsworth gave developmental psychology a new procedure for studying attachment in infants. She called it the strange situation classification, and it's widely referred to as simply the strange situation. As an adult, you know when you've formed an attachment with someone, you know how it feels, and you know how to express your feelings in words. However, when it comes to babies and young children, they haven't yet developed these skills, and therefore researchers must turn to more subtle techniques, such as the strange situation, which measures the security of an attachment in 1 to 2-year-olds. A 20-minute participatory observation, during which the researcher observes the infant's behavioural responses to a series of scenarios. Ainsworth's strange situation includes 8 stages, each lasting roughly 3 minutes. To start with, the mother, baby and researcher are all together in the room, a small, neutrally coloured space with some toys for the baby to play with. The experimenter leaves after around a minute, and the mother and baby are alone for approximately 3 minutes. In this stage, researchers are watching to see whether the child is confident to explore the new environment, or whether she stays close to the mother. A stranger joins the mother and baby in the room. The researchers record the baby's response to this unfamiliar newcomer, who is left alone with the baby when the mother leaves the room. At this stage, the researchers are observing the baby's behaviour for signs of separation anxiety. 3 minutes later, the mother returns, and the researchers observe for the baby's reunion response. The stranger leaves the room. A few minutes more, and the mother leaves the room too, leaving the baby alone for the first time in the experiment. The next person to enter the room is the stranger. And finally, after 3 minutes, the mother returns and the stranger leaves. All in all, a perfectly strange situation for all involved. So, what were the researchers measuring? When the mother was in the room with the baby, they scored the infant's behaviour on 4 measures: proximity and contact seeking, contact maintaining, avoidance of proximity and contact, and resistance to contact and comforting. The baby's exploratory. Ainsworth reported that infants display one of 3 attachment types. Securely attached infants showed distress when separated from their mother, were avoidant of the stranger when alone, but friendly in the presence of their mother, and were happy when the mother returned from outside the room. 70% of children studied fell into this category. 15% of children demonstrated an ambivalent attachment with their mother. These children showed intense distress when the mother left the room and demonstrated a significant fear of the stranger. When the mother returned to the room, ambivalent children approached the mother but rejected contact. Ainsworth reported that a final 15% had an avoidant attachment style. Such infants show no interest when the mother leaves the room and play happily with the stranger. When the mother returns, avoidant children barely seem to notice. In 1990, Main and Solomon added that a very small percentage were inconsistent in their behaviours and defined this attachment style as disorganised. Ainsworth's caregiver sensitivity hypothesis suggests that differences in infants' attachment styles are dependent on the mother's behaviour towards the baby during a critical period of development. If you enjoyed this video, please click the...
What do you think?
It's pretty interesting.
That poor baby, so distressed. Mom is. What kind of study do you think this is?
Observation.
Observation. Yes, you did do some observation. You did do some observing. Yes. Very good. Did you manipulate any variables? Very good. Observation. See? That grew up. So by the time you get to 16, it's like, what do we think? Are we surprised by these results?
No.
No. I wish they would have done a survey about how, parenting styles or something ahead of it, right? So you can kind of see
Also, I'm wondering how do they control for these kids' reactions with regards to neurodivergence? Cause my son, you can tell that he's distressed, but he doesn't show it the same way a neurotypical kid would.
right. Well, and I think so. 1969. They had
Yeah,
no idea what
that's
autism
true.
was back
Yeah.
then. I'd be interested to know because this has been repeated a lot. I'd
Okay,
be interested to know if they've accounted for
yeah.
that ahead of time.
Yeah, speaking of because they didn't believe that autism was a thing back then.
Mhm.
And you hear oh, we didn't have autism back in my day, but
Like,
the same guy's been collecting trains since he was 10 years old and had
Exactly.
an entire room just filled with trains.
you're like, yeah, bro, you didn't have autism back in the day. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that Mary Ainsworth initially too did her study with you gotta think 2-parent households, mostly white households, right? When you look at the sample size of 1969 and who was in this study, it's really limited. So as studies progressed, I think that they definitely looked at these different kinds of things. I would ADHD too.
Yeah.
That's gonna impact. You can be very securely attached and still be none of those kids paid attention to that bunny in the background. That's all I could focus on was the bunny moving around, right? Neither one, that kid didn't look at it once. Did you know what I mean? So when you look at all of these other kinds of things that would skew these results, right? And in the limitations portion of this study, I hope to goodness someone, if not Dr. Ainsworth, said, we don't know how something like neurodivergence or autism or ADHD or lead paint poisoning or whatever would impact, right, these kinds of things. If you're in any sort of childhood development classes or any sort of education classes for childhood development, you'll probably see this again. So hopefully you can add this to the conversation. Oh, I know this, right? Questions?
Did they ever do it with a dad?
That's a great question. You would think that they should.
Yeah.
If you can find one, send it to me. Because I think that especially nowadays, I think there's a lot of single fathers. I have a lot of single fathers on my caseload right now.
And I also wonder if it would be different if a caregiver was a man that came in the room versus a woman. You know, I think it would be a lot different.
Yeah, if the stranger was a man versus a
Yeah.
woman, absolutely. Like, if we wanted to take this from observational and create an experiment, I would absolutely change the stranger who comes in. Because also, did we account for the fact, is the stranger known to the child? Right? It's like, it could be a stranger, but like, if that's a person that they see at church, right? Or that's a teacher aide, and sometimes in their classroom, that's a lot different than total stranger, right? Like, the stranger's a man, stranger wasn't a white woman, right? Like, cause like the stranger that came in looked just like mom, you know what I mean? And then there was a third person in the room at one point too, and I was like, who's the person, who are the hands that are clapping? It's not mom or the stranger, like what's happening? So, yeah, there's a lot of ways the study could be adapted to be way more helpful to us nowadays, right? Right, cause that's what you wanna do, when you read research, and I'm learning this now, projecting again. When you read research, you don't take it as fact, you take it as, okay, where are the holes and how can we fix them, right? Where can we add to this to make it better, right? You're never just reading research, and this is true when we go to the library and do Smile Project too. You're never just reading research and being like, okay, that's great, right? Because, again, there's no facts in psychology, right? So you're always looking at, okay, yeah, this study asked a good question, right? Was helpful in this way, where is it lacking and where do the gaps need to be filled, right? Because at any point in time when you're entering that academic space, whether it's your bachelor's, your master's, for independent research at this level of education, a doctorate, you're always going to be moving into a space of, okay, how can I add to this, or how can I prove that this was not this study? Right. So that's what I'm doing in the next 2 weeks before my first term is. So, questions, concerns? Good thinking, guys. Okay, so, Smile Projects due when?
30th.
The 30th. Please, 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 start this weekend, please. Moving Inquisitive chapter 4 to the second, so we will be all the way done with chapter 4 by then. Use this as a study aid if you'd like. We will, like I said, next week, Tuesday, we're gonna finish chapter 4. We're going to roll right into the exam review on Thursday. We'll go over the Respondus browser. We will go over all of the exam questions. We will go over some study techniques and strategies if you'd like. And then we will roll right into the next unit, the next chapters, some of my favorites. So we'll get right into it.